Hey, what's up VC? Alex here. Back for my second video of today. I did a response to Joe's 500 subscriber contest earlier, and that video has been up for a few hours now, so go and check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, I wanted to come back on here and make another video and kind of start off a new series for the channel, because I don't really have a whole lot of structure to my channel. I just kind of upload whatever I feel like doing, and mostly it's kind of vinyl updates and threads and that kind of thing. But yeah, I wanted to start off a kind of dedicated, structured series, and I wanted to start reviewing albums, which is not something that I've really done on the channel up until now. I mean, I have talked about albums, of course I've talked about so many albums through my vinyl updates, my thread responses, and various other things. The first few videos I did on this channel were pretty much just kind of Bob Dylan CD reviews and Beatles CD reviews, and I did talk about the albums that I was showing, but it was more about the kind of complete package, the packaging and just the whole thing together, as opposed to just focusing on the album and the music. So I thought I'd start off a new series and start doing some album reviews. And yeah, I know it's a bit boring and a bit obvious, but I thought I'd go back and, well, not go back, but I thought I'd start a Bob Dylan series of reviews, and basically start with his first record. I'm actually going to start with his second album, because I don't feel the need to review his debut, but yeah, I'm going to start with his second album, which is what I'm going to do today, and go through chronologically his studio albums. And of course it's going to be difficult for me to do every single one, because he's released between 30 and 40, I think, albums in total. So it'd be tough for me to do every single one, and I don't really have a lot to say about some of the 80s and 90s stuff. But I'll definitely try and do the 60s and 70s albums and kind of go through them chronologically and do kind of mini reviews. So yeah, I'm going to start today with Dylan's second album, because I don't really see the need to review his debut self-titled album from 1962. I mean, I like that album. There's definitely times where I can listen to it, but it's just so far off the pace in regards to how good Dylan can be, that I just don't really see it in the context of his career, because it's mostly, kind of cover songs. He didn't have a whole lot of original material on the album. It was mainly cover songs that he was doing, kind of folk standards, and he was still really finding his feet, in regards to finding his niche in the musical community and the folk scene, I guess. And he was far more established when this second album came out. He was playing far more highly regarded shows, and he was starting to play around the city and reach a whole different demographic of people. And of course, the album I'm talking about that kind of came off the back of those shows is the Freewheelin Bob Dylan, his second album from, I think, April 1963, could have been May 63, but yeah, this came out the year after his debut album, after he was picked up from Columbia. And this is definitely kind of a coming-of-age album, for sure. You can't deny that this was the album that catapulted Bob Dylan into, just a whole new realm of popularity. And he was starting to, as I say, he was starting to reach, a demographic of people that just wouldn't pay any notice to him, before he had that exposure in New York. And yeah, I mean, this is a coming-of-age record and a seminal 60s album, and it's one of the albums that really got me into Dylan in the first place. The first kind of half dozen songs that I heard from Dylan, probably 4 or 5 of them were from this. So it's very important to me, and it's held, I hold it in pretty high esteem. And yeah, I mean, there's not a lot I can say about the album in general. I'm going to go through it track by track. I mean, I've talked about this so much, but I mean, I love pretty much every track on this album. There's a couple of ones where I think he's a bit off the pace. It's a bit weak in comparison to some of the other songs. But in general, I mean, there's not really a weak track on here. There's not a track that if I'm playing the whole album through, there's not a track that I'll skip. And it's just, in my opinion, his first masterpiece. Definitely not the album which I would go to and say it's his best, or not even in the top 3 or 4. I'd probably put this at number 5, behind Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61, Bringing It All Back Home, Blood on the Tracks, and potentially Desire or John Wesley Harding. But it's definitely in that top 5 or 6, and it's an album which never gets old. I see this as just a timeless album that I can just come back to over and over again and just love every single time. So yeah, really an iconic record, and I'm going to go through this track by track and talk about kind of what each song means to me, I guess. So I'll try and get through this quite swiftly. By the way, I hope you like my new glasses. Got these today after quite a long wait. I had to wait kind of a week or 2 for these to come. But yeah, I've never worn glasses before in any of my videos, but I have been short-sighted for a few years now. So yeah, I've been looking for some frames that I would like, I could wear on a day-to-day basis, and I came to the conclusion that these were the ones. So yeah, I hope you guys like them. But yeah, that's just just a bit of a side note, I guess. So getting back to the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, I'm going to go through track by track. The opening track, obviously a classic, and I've mentioned this song in my video from earlier today, and my top 15 songs, Bob Dylan songs of the 60s, and of course it's Blowing in the Wind. Great track. I mean, it's pretty simple in structure, and in some respect, I guess it's quite simple lyrically. But it's definitely a multi-layered song, and it says a lot about the state of America at the time, and it was very much considered a kind of protest anthem. This was covered by just so many people at the time. After this record came out, there was just hordes of people, hordes of artists and bands that would cover Dylan's stuff, and probably none more so than "Blowing in the Wind." It's probably the main song that was covered of Dylan's in the early days. So yeah, great track, but as I mentioned in my video from earlier, I kind of got a bit bored of it because I've heard it so many times. It's kind of lost some of its spark and some of its magic for me. But I definitely appreciate just how important that song was for him. And it might have been the song that was responsible for bringing him to probably a much greater audience. He was definitely gaining popularity with his other songs, but I think "Blown in the Wind" was so important for reaching a whole different audience of people, a more popular popular niche, I guess, in the industry. So yeah, that's "Blowing in the Wind." Second song is "Girl from the North Country," which is one of Dylan's great kind of early love songs. I think this one was about, not Suze Rotolo, his first girlfriend. I can't remember her name now, but I've read a bit about her. And "Girl from the North Country," again, a very simple song, kind of blissfully simple and kind of innocent, I guess. And, just a beautiful, slow song to listen to. So, yeah, great second track to have on this album. And then we get into some more serious territory with the third track on the album, "Masters of War." One of Dylan's great early compositions. No doubt this was a very, very important song. Just an anthem of everything that was wrong with America and the people that Dylan was kind of looking to in political power, and also kind of looking back into the past as well at some of the dictators, and kind of putting them down, and it's a really, really harsh song. I mean, he's really getting, he's cutting all the bullshit out and just getting straight to the point, and the last verse is probably the most powerful. when he talks about hoping that, you know, the masters of war, you know, hoping they would die. And, you know, it gets pretty dark, but it's definitely one of the most truthful moments on this album. So, great song, definitely one of my favourites on the album. Down the Highway is a pretty simple, I think it's a 12-bar blues song. I'm not sure about that, but it's got a very interesting chord progression, chord structure. And yeah, great song. I like the song. It's one of those catchier songs that doesn't really have much depth on the surface, but you know, it's a good song. Fifth song is Bob Dylan's Blues, which is one of the more comical moments on the album. It's probably the first time he starts to get comical in his songs. And it's kind of I wouldn't call it a talking blues song, which is, you know, some of the stuff he was writing was talking blues, as it was defined. But this is more just a kind of satirical kind of thing. You know, he was being very cheeky and very tongue-in-cheek with this. And, you know, it's a good song. Next track is undoubtedly my favourite on the whole album. And I'm sure it's many other people's favourites as well. Some of you know, the people I know who like Dylan, this is, you know, the majority of them's favourite Dylan song. And of course, it's A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which is playing actually in the background now. If you can hear that, you probably can't. Yeah, what can I say about this song? I mean, I talked about it in my top 15 Bob Dylan songs of the 60s. And, you know, just an incredible song that kind of summarised all of Dylan's feelings at the time. And, you know, most people thought it was about, you know, when he was singing about hard rain, most people kind of associated that with atomic rain, you know, and the whole, you know, nuclear, you know, debate at the time, whether, you know, there was going to be a nuclear war and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And most people thought that's what Dylan was talking about. But I think, you know, in interviews, he kind of reveals that it's about more than that. That might have influenced, you know, some of the songwriting and, you know, some of the lyrical content. And he did write it. He said that he did write it during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it's obviously has a strong resonance in this song. But it goes way deeper for me, and it's such a moving and emotional song to listen to. And, you know, one that if I'm coming back to this album, it's the song that I most look forward to, I would say. So, yeah, and again, it's one of the first songs where Dylan really stretched out the length of his songs. I think it's a 6 or 7 minute track. And, you know, he doesn't, you know, kind of butcher it down to kind of scraps. He keeps it full and raw. And it's just a complete and utter masterpiece. So, yeah, that's Hard Rain. Next track is one of the more popular songs on the album. This is one that made it onto a lot of the greatest hits albums. Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. Again, a kind of love song, but also about heartbreak, you know, breaking up with a girl and kind of putting it down. It's one of the early kind of put-down songs. Dylan was famous for writing these put-down songs. And Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, even though it's a lot more subtle than some of his other put-down songs, I guess. You know, I definitely would say it's kind of a put down on this girl, and it's quite harsh and mean in a lot of ways. But it's a great song lyrically, so I like listening to that one. Bob Dylan's Dream is the next track, which is again quite a serious song, quite a sentimental song as well. You know, Dylan kind of talking nostalgically about his past. And he's probably going back to Minnesota and talking about the friends he had when he was back there. And he, you know, he kind of goes deep on this song, talking about, you know, how, you know, being with his friends, he didn't really have a care in the world. You know, he would just sit there and kind of disregard everything else and felt like he could do anything. And, you know, it's kind of a coming of age song. It's like, that's how I used to think, and now I see the bigger picture. So, yeah, again, I like listening to the track, but it's not one of my favourites on here, I have to say. But I'll still listen to it quite happily. Next track is Oxford Town, which is one of the short and snappy songs on this album. Again, very politically charged. I think this was about the shooting of a black man down in Mississippi. Somewhere in Mississippi, there was a shooting of a black man. Obviously, there was so much racism back at this time in the States, and it was just such a potent issue. You couldn't escape it. You know, watching the documentary No Direction Home, that really comes through that, you know, racism was just so overwhelming at this time, and Dylan was writing songs about it. And Oxford Town is, yeah, it's a very specific topical song about, I can't remember who specifically it's about, but it's about shooting, I think down at a university in Mississippi or something. And one of my favourite lines from the song is, somebody better investigate soon. And it's kind of one of those lines that kind of applies to more things than what the song is about, I guess. It goes further than that, that statement, you know, somebody better investigate soon. You know, the kind of mass naivety and ignorance of a lot of people. But yeah, that's again one of my favorite songs on the album, even though it's very, very short. Next song, Talking World War III Blues. One of his first, I think maybe his first talking blues song, as I was mentioning earlier. Again, great track, a very funny track to listen to, very comical, and yeah, it's just one of those tracks that just kind of draws you in. And you know, he wrote several talking blues songs around this period of time. Talking World War III Blues was probably the first one. Then there was Talking John Birch Paranoid Blues and Talking Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues. And these were songs that really displayed, you know, Dylan's comedy and his sense of humour. And it's great, you know, it's great to see. It really adds variety to this record because there's so much, you know, there's serious content, there's, you know, political content, there's deeper stuff, there's shallower stuff, there's comedy stuff, and you know, there's just pretty much something for everybody on here. So yeah, that's what I love about Talking World War III Blues. Third to last track is Corina Corina, which I think is the only cover song on the album. I think he covered that. I'm not sure the artist that did that song originally, but I love Dylan's version on this album. I think it's just really, really nice to listen to. Very mellow, very I love the guitar work on this song, and I love the spin that Dylan puts on this song. Definitely, even though it's a cover song, it's definitely you know, definitely got kind of a stamp of originality to it. So yeah, that's Corina Corina. Penultimate track is Honey Just Allow Me One More Chance, which is one of my least favourite songs, maybe my least favourite song on the album. But again, very short, and it's pretty fast-paced and, you know, very energetic. But I don't feel like the song has too much to it. I feel like I could definitely kind of do without it, I guess. It doesn't really add anything to the entirety of the record, but you know, it's definitely pleasurable to listen to, so I don't really mind it being on there. And the final song is I Shall Be Free, which isn't really my favourite track on the album either, but it's, you know, again, a kind of comical song in many ways, but also has some kind of more serious overtones, some political overtones. But yeah, no, it's very light-hearted, very comical. Dylan talking about knowing John F. Kennedy, and it's you know, great to listen to. So yeah, that's every track on this. As I said just then, you know, just going through the tracks, then it reminds me just how varied this album is in regards to content. And even though he was, you know, a pretty simple artist back in '63, you know, he hadn't yet, you know, gone into more experimental, abstract work. You know, he wasn't incorporating electric instruments. It's a purely acoustic album, and it's you know, by no means, you know, one of his best in terms of how three-dimensional it is. I see it as quite a two-dimensional album. In many ways, he talks about this quite a lot in interviews between '63 and kind of '66, how, you know, he kind of found a way to write songs in a much more abstract and three-dimensional way, and the early albums were quite easy to see through. You know, they were quite easy to decode, and I agree with that to some extent. But I mean, I still find great pleasure and great, you know, emotional depth in these songs. So I think it's a masterpiece, and I think it will always be a kind of timeless classic, an iconic album for many people. And, you know, it'd be many people's favourites, I'm sure. But for me, it's kind of overshadowed by some of the later mid-60s stuff. But, you know, it will definitely hold, it will forever hold a place, you know, in my collection and my heart. So, yeah, that's the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. That's kind of my overview of the tracks and a bit of background information. Let me know in the comments what you think of this album, and maybe if it's your favourite Bob Dylan album. And if it is, then, you know, tell me why. But that's pretty much the first installment in my Bob Dylan review series. Let me know if you like the idea of me doing Dylan reviews and going through his albums chronologically, or whether I should just save my energy and do something else. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.